Okay, hi. We today are going to be talking about Moses. And just for a little background so that you can remember, God had chosen Abraham to give him special promises years and years before of a special land, that he would have a large family that would become a great nation, and through him all the world would be blessed. That promise was passed down from Abraham to his son Isaac, and then to his son Jacob, and then to his 12 sons. And one of his sons was Joseph, who we just heard had been sold as a slave to Egypt, and God blessed him there in Egypt so that he became second in command, second only to the Pharaoh himself. And he was able to save his family from a famine. All his family, he met his brothers again after many years, and his whole family went to live in Egypt, in the land of Goshen. So I'm going to show you a map. Let's see. Here we have the land of Canaan over here. All right. This is the Mediterranean Sea. You probably remember where Egypt is. So Egypt is down here. It's like southwest of Canaan. So they had a fairly long journey to get from Canaan to Egypt, where they lived in Goshen. And you remember Egypt is the land of the pyramids and many amazing buildings, treasure cities that the Pharaoh had built. We will also be talking about this area. Down in here, it was a wilderness area, the land of Midian and the mountain of Sinai. We'll be talking about those as well. So try and keep that map in mind as we speak. So there was many years went by after Joseph's family came to live with him in Egypt. When they came, there was 70 people. His 11 brothers had married and had children, and everyone in his family numbered 70 people when they came to the land of Goshen to live. But many years later, there were hundreds and thousands of Israelites. In fact, there was a new Pharaoh came to the throne of Egypt, and he saw all those people living in Goshen, and he thought, those are not Egyptians. What are they doing here? Where did they come from? He did not know about Joseph and how Joseph had saved the land of Egypt from famine through God's power, and how his family had come to live there and become a great nation in the land of Egypt. In fact, there were so many descendants from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob that there were more what they call Hebrews or Israelites than there were Egyptians. Well, this got the Pharaoh to thinking. He thought, what if there's a war and these people that are not Egyptian fight on the other side? They'll conquer us because there's so many of them. We need to do something about this. So his solution was to make the Hebrew people, the family of Joseph, into slaves. So they became slaves of the Egyptians. He made them build his treasure cities, amazing buildings, but it was hard work. And it wasn't just hard work. There's nothing wrong with hard work. But the Bible says that the Egyptians afflicted the Hebrews. They made it as hard as possible. They gave them heavier burdens than they were able to bear, and then they would beat them for not carrying them well. They would give them too much to do and then punish them for not being able to do it. And they thought this would make the Hebrews weak, and so they wouldn't be able to fight against the Egyptians. But God was blessing the Hebrews. And the more that Pharaoh and his people afflicted the Israelites, the Hebrews, the more babies they had. So there was more and more and more of them. Well, the Pharaoh said, well, that's not working. So he had to come up with another plan. So he called the midwives. Those were the women that were in charge of helping the Hebrew women have their babies, kind of like a doctor. So he called those midwives to him and he said, when Hebrew women are having their babies, I want you to kill the boy babies. You can leave the girls. I don't care about them. But when a boy is born, I want you to kill it. Well, the midwives, they did not want to sin like that against God. And so they did not listen to the Pharaoh. They did not kill the boy babies. So the Pharaoh realized there was still a whole bunch of boy babies being born. He called the midwives to him and he said, what have you done? I told you to kill those babies. And the midwives, they honored God. They said, well, you know, the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women. They have their babies before we even get there, so it's too late. Well, then the Pharaoh, he got mad and he made a new law that all of the Hebrew women, when they had a boy baby, it was the law that baby was to be thrown in the river. So obviously those babies would die. Well, God had told Abraham years before that his promised family would live in a foreign land, just like the Hebrews were living in Egypt. That they would live in a foreign land and they would serve others and they would be afflicted 400 years. Now remember, they lived longer back then. Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, they all lived over 100 years. And so that would be like 4 generations. So God had told Abraham this and he said, that nation who they serve, I will judge. And afterward, they will come out of there with great riches. In the 4th generation, they will come hither to the promised land of Canaan. They would go back to Canaan. After all that time, God would rescue them. Well, we don't know how many people of the Israelites, of the Hebrews, remembered that promise. We don't know how many of them were still worshiping God, but God remembered his promise, and there were some who remembered. So the Pharaoh had commanded that all the baby boys should be thrown in the river. What would you do? Well, there was a family who lived there, and they had a baby boy. Now, the parents were Amram and Jochebed. The father was Amram, the mother was Jochebed, and there were already 2 children in the family. There was a girl, Miriam, she was about 13, and then there was a little brother, an older brother to the baby. He was 3 years old. So this was the family that the baby was born into, and when the mother saw the baby, she thought, this is a goodly child. The Bible describes him as a goodly child. Now, all mothers love their babies. Generally speaking, that's the way it's supposed to be. But this baby, she knew he was special. He must have been so handsome and so healthy that she just thought, this is a very special baby. So she hid him. She did not throw him in the river. I don't know how she could have anyway. She definitely tried to save her baby. She hid him for 3 months. Now, I don't know if you've had a baby in the house. Babies are really noisy. When they want to eat or they're uncomfortable or they want someone to pick them up, they know how to be really loud, cry really loudly. So somehow this family was able to keep their baby quiet and hidden for 3 months. But then they could no longer hide the baby. He was too big. He was too active, maybe too loud. They couldn't hide him any longer. And so Jochebed came up with a plan. By God's grace and wisdom, she came up with a plan. She made a basket and then she painted it all over with slime and tar to make it waterproof. And then she put the baby in the basket. And then she obeyed the king's order. She took the basket down to the river and she put it in the river. She put it at the edge of the river among the bulrushes in the shallow water. And Miriam, the older sister, she stayed and watched from a distance to see what was going to happen to her baby brother. And something did happen. A lady came to the river to wash herself. They didn't have showers and bathtubs probably in those days, and so she was coming down to the river to wash herself. It was the Pharaoh's daughter. We don't know how old she was. She had a bunch of maids with her. Her royal maids came with her. And she saw that little basket in the river and she was very curious. So she sent a maid over to go get it. Go get that for me. So the maid went and got it and brought it back to her. And when she opened it up, it was a baby. And the baby started to cry and her heart just melted. She had compassion on this baby. She wanted to have this baby. She wanted to cuddle it and make it feel better. She wanted to keep it. Well, then Miriam, who had been watching, came running over and she said, "Oh, do you want me to go get a Hebrew nurse to take care of the baby for you?" And the princess, the Pharaoh's daughter, she knew this must be a Hebrew baby. She said, "Yes, you go find me someone to take care of the baby for me." So of course, Miriam ran home to get her very own mother to come and take care of the baby. Now, how nice is that? So Miriam ran to call her mother, and the Pharaoh's daughter, she pretended that she didn't know anything, or maybe she wasn't really sure that this was the baby's mother, and she said, "You take this baby, you take care of it for me, and I will pay you for it." And so Jochebed was able to take her own son home with her openly and not hide him anymore, and she was going to get paid to take care of her baby boy. She didn't need to hide him any longer. Now, Jochebed knew that she was going to have to give her baby to the Pharaoh's daughter when he was old enough to be on his own, when he didn't need her anymore. And so while Jochebed had her son in her home, she must have taught him everything she could. She knew she had a limited time, and she taught him everything that she could about the Hebrew nation, about his heritage, about Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and the God of heaven and the promises that he had made to their people. She taught him as much as she could, even though he was very small. And then the child grew, and Jochebed took him to the Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. Now, the Pharaoh's daughter is the one that named the little boy. She called him Moses. She said, "Because I drew him out of the water." That's what Moses means. So, Jochebed and Amram must have been overwhelmed by how God had saved their son. And they must have suspected that he had a special plan for this little boy. It was a very unusual situation, but a wonderful thing that had happened. Well, after Moses went to live at the palace, then he was taught by the teachers at the palace and by the princess and the Pharaoh. He was taught all the things that he would need to know as the Pharaoh's adopted grandson, as the princess's son. He would have learned all about Egypt, the history, the customs, the science, the wisdom that they had, their language. He would have learned all of that on top of everything he had been taught about the Hebrews. And he would have lived a very fancy life. Fancy food, fancy toys, everything would have been the best as the adopted son of the princess. Well, through all of this, the Israelites, the Hebrews, they still were working hard and being afflicted by the Egyptians. And it was getting worse and worse. And so they were praying, they were calling out to God, "God, help us, please rescue us." And they were pleading with God for deliverance. So what was going to happen? I think many of you know, but we will talk more about that next week. I hope that you have a great one. Bye.